Avi Mayer's Northtown Neighborhood News Magazine, a presentation of Sonny Hirsch and myself. Dial us up on the web at ntnm.org, where you'll find links to 1,000+ interviews on YouTube. Community Policing, caps24.org. Sonny Hirsch in his spare time is the chairman of the District Advisory Committee of the 24th District. And it is a pleasure to introduce you to somebody we had on as a candidate, somebody who actually made the cover of Jewish Chicago in the November election issue. And she is presently an attorney and an adjunct law professor at DePaul, and that's Kathy Myalls. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me.
First of all, thank you. And tell us what kind of law you do, and tell us what kind of classes you teach.
I'm Assistant General Counsel at the Interpublic Group, which is a holding company that owns a variety of advertising and marketing and PR agencies. I serve as effectively the General Counsel for in different capacities for the agencies that are part of the Interpublic Group of companies. As an adjunct professor at DePaul, I teach communications law, not to law students, but to communications majors who need to know a little bit about the law that governs what they plan to do as journalists or PR professionals or advertisers. Or we cover election law too. We cover a lot that has to do with the First Amendment.
My degree is actually in communications because Columbia didn't have a specific degree at the time in journalism. And I can't begin to tell you how valuable my knowledge of communications law is, particularly libel, because it was such a pleasure when the Silversteins so politely offered to sue my brains out for me to be able to publicly turn the tables on them due to my teachers having properly taught me what the laws are.
It's a valuable education to have, whatever you decide to do with it, and I really am enjoying that piece of my life right now. The students are really engaging, and I think they're learning a lot. It's fun. No,
that's very cool, and it's very important because the fact of the matter is, if you really are guilty of libel, you can lose an awful lot of money, reputation, career, the whole shot.
But at the same time, you know, the First Amendment really protects, absent some malicious intent, really protects a lot of speech, as it should. And so we try to teach the students the fine line between, being aggressive journalists and really seeking the truth and not being afraid to speak things that they believe are true. And, of course, on the other side of that is not doing their job and not doing the investigation they should. So we talk a lot about the ethics of journalism and the ethics, apart from the law, what you can do versus what you should do. And as you know, sometimes those are very different things.
Very different things. And as a matter of fact, that should be a topic for a whole interview for another time.
Love to do that.
Yeah. One thing I do want to point out about that, even if you have malicious intent, if you're telling the truth.
Truth is always a defense to libel and slander. That's what I tell them. Truth is always a defense for everything except the right to privacy cases. When it may be true, but it shouldn't have been spoken or published, and a whole different category.
No, definitely. So anyway, listen, being a political junkie and you ran for state representative, what's the state of the state these days?
Well, the state of the state, I think, is a little more optimistic than it was before the election. We now have a governor who, from all appearances to me, seems to get it, at least in terms of what the problem is, how big it is, and how hard the choices we have to make will be going forward. And I think it's refreshing to hear somebody call it like it is in terms of what the problem is. Now, forging solutions with a Democratic supermajority still has its challenges, of course, and the recent Supreme Court decision is offering some guidance as to what the choices can't be in terms of how to fix the problem. And, I think now we all need to take a step back, look at what the Supreme Court has told us about what they think the Constitution constrains the legislature from doing, and then figure out what we can do given our Constitution and this current Supreme Court's interpretation of it, and work hard to solve the problems we have. We can't, taxing our way out of this problem is not the solution, because we know what's happened to taxpayers in the state over the last few years. We've lost more taxpayers than any state except New Jersey.
Yeah, where, as a matter of fact, the Allied Man Lines is very grateful to us as a state where you're lately either first or second in people moving out of state.
Yes.
And the fact, revenue is not the problem. People don't realize that the state has taken in record amounts of revenue.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. Yeah. And if we don't fix the spending problem, you can't tax your way out of this, because you end up driving taxpayers and businesses and families out of the state, which is what we've been doing. And when that happens, the people who are left, the people who are, unfortunately, the people who are really among the neediest among us are the ones that are left. They don't have the option always to move. If you don't own your business, if you don't have skill sets that are really easily marketable in other places, you don't always have the luxury of picking up and moving, even if you want to. And that's not the choice we want our citizens to have to make, right? To leave the state to avoid a heavy tax burden, or to stay and bear that burden, at the expense of other things that their families need or want. And we don't want to bust up families and neighborhoods and friendships and schools and force people into other places because of bad spending policies in the state.
My next door neighbor is actually moving to Indiana. They're going to keep their job in Chicago and commute. But it's that much cheaper to live there, and it's a lot more hassle-free. People don't begin to understand that in Chicago, as well as the state of Illinois, close to 50% of the money spent goes to debt service on bonds and obligations and pensions.
Yes.
I mean, when if you'd like, people would like, I have no problem if people want to spend money on social service programs if you can write the check. If I've got $1,000 in my bank account and I want to write a check for $2,000, bank's not going to let me.
That's right.
But in the government's case, since these people are writing the laws themselves, it's a whole different story. It's one of the reasons why, even though I am not in favor of abortion in the least, I think retroactive abortion for most state elected officials is not the worst idea.
Well, I'm not sure that's the right solution. But I think we could do something short of that. But I think the good thing about the governor is he started to identify some of those problems and said, we have to stop the bleeding, and the way we stop the bleeding is to quit making promises we can't keep. We have to keep the promises we've made. We have, particularly for people who are already retired and who can't change their outcome, we have to keep those promises. For people close to retirement, we need to do that too. But for people who are just coming into the system, people who are only, in it for a shorter time, further away from retirement, we have to convert the public sector, as we have the private sector, to 401k defined contribution plans instead of defined benefits plans. Then the state knows what its obligations are. We can meet them on a go-forward basis, and we start to make the problem smaller instead of bigger.
No question about it. And, at least he's a real businessman. People don't understand that. I've always felt very strongly that governors, mayors, presidents should have administrative experience.
Yes, and business experience, and, experience balancing books, experience doing something besides running their campaigns. And unfortunately, when we look to those candidates to run, the enormous pressure that we're under as candidates to do that and still participate in the business community and support our families other ways, that tension really helps those of us that have run understand why we don't get more business people that are running for office. The demands on the Illinois legislature are stronger than they are in other states. Texas, they only meet every 2 years, which is a good thing. You can do less damage meeting once every 2 years than you can.
That's the way it used to be in Illinois. As a matter of fact, when I was a little kid, it was $8,000 a year, and they only convened every other year. And by the way, along that point, people really don't want to run who are qualified because they don't want to get. Who needs to deal with the insert bad word in Springfield?
It's a challenge to get people who are qualified to want to run, given the state of politics and the personal attacks that you and sometimes your family have to put up with when you're a candidate. It takes somebody who's really committed to doing it to survive all that.
No question. I want to thank you very much. Do you want to give any contact information if people want to contact you? Or?
You can always reach me through my Facebook page. It's still called Kathy for State Rep. And certainly through through messaging me through that website, and then still through my regular email, Myalls at kathyforstaterep.com.
Kathy Myalls, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.